Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
All right. Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Adam Keller, and I'm here with my co-host and fellow agitator, David Story, today, filling in for Jacob Morrison. We're broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today, we discuss the upcoming election with Democratic Senate candidate Will Boyd and independent candidate for Alabama Governor Jared Budlong. We'll catch up on the rising tide of labor in Alabama. And overtime today, we're going to have Warren Tidwell from Hometown Action on and talk about what to do when you're called into the boss's office. All that and more on today's Valley Labor Report. If you want to be part of the program today, we do have a phone number and the line is open. You can call or text 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. You can also leave us a voicemail throughout the week. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time we wrap our hour here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, then you can find us online at the Valley Labor Report. Reminder that your support keeps us on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. If you want to become a sustaining member of the program, make a one-time donation, or buy our new hat, you can go to tvlr.fm or patreon.com/the Valley Labor Report. If you're a member of a union or a local organization, you should get your local to sponsor the show. Reach out to us for more details on that. And finally, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today, whether you're a loyal listener or a first-time listener. We appreciate you spending some time with us. And I really appreciate David Story, longtime union leader and co-founder of the Valley Labor Report, sitting in with me today in the studio while Jacob is out. So as I mentioned, Jacob's not here today, so bear with us if there's any bumps in the road today, especially on the technical side of things. The phone lines are open, but I do recommend texting or commenting in the YouTube or Facebook chats, as there's a much greater chance I'll be able to respond to it today. Just a little pro tip. Special thanks to all of you who do donate and all of you who comment and call in, all of you who've liked us, shared us, and reviewed us. Your engagement on social media and podcasting apps really does help, and that's a quick, easy, free way to support the program. If you believe it's important to have our own media of, by, and for the Southern working class, please consider supporting us however you can, and please share with your coworkers, friends, family, and neighbors. So, David, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, not a problem, man. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. A little blast from the past. This is like the chaos lineup, you and me. No Jacob today.
Yeah. You said bear with us if the technical side goes awry, but I got a funny feeling the commentary side may go awry as well.
That's okay. That's okay. We're keeping it interesting today. Before we go any deeper into the show, I did want to take a couple of minutes to reflect on last weekend's successful Alabama Troublemaker School conducted by Labor Notes at the University of Montevallo. Over 120 Southern working class activists gathered on Saturday, October 15th, to sharpen their skills and build their solidarity. The crowd was very diverse in terms of race, gender, age, industry, occupation, affiliation, and background. There were seasoned union stewards with decades of experience, new organizers just starting the fight to build a union, and community activists seeking to strengthen their coalition with labor. There were folks from across the state and from North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia in attendance. Numerous unions and organizations were represented, with CWA and Raise Up the South in particular showing up in a big way. And there were some familiar faces there from IFPTE, Hometown Action, UMWA, RWDSU, Birmingham DSA, Starbucks Workers United, United Campus Workers, and more. And how many other spaces will you find worker-led discussion and workshops with participants ranging from line cooks to rocket scientists in the same room? Right? I just don't know of many events that are like that.
Yeah, it was amazing. You know, I wasn't able to attend, but I saw the pictures and I heard the stories that y'all have come back, and you know, just the fact that the labor movement's growing in this state, you know, says a lot about this radio. We were talking about it before the show. It says a lot about this radio show, and how y'all have kind of bridged the gaps between labor and labor-friendly organizations, and you know, organizations that kind of share our own perspective and ideologies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I give you a lot of credit for that, because, you know, you and Jacob got this thing started, and I've been fortunate enough to step in and try to help out where I could. And I'm really proud of what we've accomplished, and I'm proud to see the Troublemaker School be so successful. I think there's a lot of good things to see coming from Alabama's labor movement, and it's trending in the right direction.
Yeah, it's about time. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you know, back to Saturday, you had folks from call centers to coal mines learning from each other and swapping stories. And I think there's something very powerful about that, something pretty damn cool about that, really. And I want to thank Labor Notes for being willing to invest in the working people of Alabama and the South so that we can put the movement back into the Southern labor movement. And shout out to all the folks who served on the planning committee, the speakers and trainers, and everyone else who volunteered in any capacity to make this event a success. It was an honor for me to conduct a couple stewards workshops alongside a great brother from the CWA, Matt Flone. And I know when we were in Chicago for the big Labor Notes conference in June, those of us from Alabama were already scheming on how to bring Labor Notes back home. By July, Louise Leon and Courtney Smith from Labor Notes already pulled several of us together to form an organizing committee and begin the planning of this event. We all worked together to plan the content and organize the logistics. It was a collective effort and a collective success. And David, you and I were talking before the show. It was, 3 or 4 years ago when Labor Notes last held an event in Alabama. I happened to meet up with you and Jacob down there at the Adelante Worker Center, and there was maybe a dozen people there, 12, 15.
At best.
And so to have roughly 10 times that number of attendees at this year's Troublemaker School, I think really demonstrates the energy of the resurgent labor movement here in Alabama and across the South.
Yep.
And
there, there's I love Labor Notes. I've always been a big fan of Labor Notes, been a subscriber for years, and know most of the staff there personally. But we don't have to have Labor Notes come down. We could do this every year. And that's what, and I think that's kind of the point of what Labor Notes wants to build, is something that's organic in your own community,
and sustainable.
Yep.
And I 100% agree with you. And I think there were a lot of conversations last weekend about, hey, let's not let this be the last one.
Yep.
Let's keep it going. And you're right. Labor Notes helped us kick it off, but we've got the people right here. We've got the expertise. And so I hope everyone who attended learned something useful and formed some new connections to grow their allies. I can't wait to see the lasting impact that comes out of it, because I know it certainly made a difference in some of those relationships. If not the knowledge, is going to make a lasting impact. And for those of you who couldn't attend, be sure to check out last week's episode of the Valley Labor Report, where Jacob interviewed several of the workshop trainers. It's not a replacement for having been there, but it will give you an idea of what we learned and discussed on Saturday, and hopefully advance your learning when it comes to the labor movement and organizing. Thanks again, Labor Notes. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to the next Troublemaker School. As David said, we can do this, and we should keep doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. if nothing else, just getting those rank and file members together to talk about how to move forward in this state and progress our ideologies and our agendas. And, it's important. Everybody else does it except for us. Granted, we've got AFL-CIO conventions and things like that, but there's never really a space like what Labor Notes provides, where rank and file members talk about those issues and not people that are separated from you in leadership positions.
Right. And something you just said that resonated is that if you think about it, the bosses and politicians are always doing these kind of events, right? They're always networking. They're always at the golf course or at the casino or
CPAC.
Right. They're always getting together. They're always sharpening their skills and building their solidarity amongst themselves. So I think it's imperative that we do the same. I want to switch gears here to Last Week in Southern Labor, which is a segment we do pretty much every week, where we tell you what happened in the labor movement in the South. We pull the information from Jonah Furman's newsletter, Who Gets the Bird, which compiles all this information for the entire United States. So if you want to see what's going on outside the South, subscribe to his newsletter, whogetsthebird.substack.com. With that, let's jump into new organizing for the week of October 8th through 15th. And this one I'm really excited about. 172 workers in New Orleans are seeking to form the first ever Lowe's union and are going with an independent union inspired in part by the Home Depot workers in Philadelphia. I think that's huge to see Philadelphia, Home Depot, New Orleans, Lowe's. That's a big deal. These are two of the biggest employers in the country. And we've got more and more folks are in this kind of work, and it's about time that those be union jobs. Also, in new organizing, for More Perfect Union, Jonah covered the formation of yet another independent union, this time among 300 customer service workers at T-Mobile. So we're seeing a trend with these brand new independent unions starting from scratch. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Moving on to wins and losses for the week, around 100 Apple Store workers in Oklahoma City voted 56-32 to join CWA, making it the second store to unionize among Apple Store chains, and it's the first with CWA. The other store organized with the Machinists outside of Baltimore. So way to go, Machinists. Way to go, CWA, breaking into Apple. There were 10 linemen from the Rawls County Electric Co-op in New London, Missouri, who voted 8-2 to join IBEW Local 2. There were 3 Lockheed Martin clericals at the Air Force Base in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, who voted 2-1 to join the Machinists District Lodge 75. And I just got to say, I love it when I see those tiny little union elections, 2-1. That's interesting. And way to go, Machinists, being willing to welcome them in, even such a small workforce. And there was one loss in the South for the week. There were 111 warehouse workers and drivers for Ryder Logistics in Hazelwood, Missouri, who voted 21-32 not to join Teamsters Local 688. Moving on to strikes and bargaining. The BMWE, the third largest rail union, has voted down its tentative agreement from the National Freight Rail Carriers and put a strike back on the table for as soon as November 19th. Nobody could have seen this coming, right? Unless, of course, you were talking to the actual railroad workers. The interesting thing about the timing, except for the fact that it's, of course, after the midterms, is that we'll likely hear vote results from the 2 bigger unions, BLET and SMART-TD, 1 to 2 days before the November 19th deadline. And based on the details of their tentative agreements that came out after Biden did his little victory lap, I just can't see them both ratifying, especially now that the BMWE has shown some defiance. The BMWE workers, for the most part, aren't even subject to the worst of the work-life balance issues. Plus, there's a borderline poison pill in the BLET SMART-TD TAs in its creation of self-supporting pools, which adds a whole other layer of scheduling uncertainty for the operating crafts. And that's not just me and Jonah being cranks about this. It was also covered in the New York Times. So sticking with the rail lines, elsewhere in rail votes, the SMART MD, the SMART's mechanics division, about 2,000 members or so, and the National Conference of Firemen and Oilers, which is affiliated with SEIU, both voted to ratify their deals this week. So the count is now 5 unions to 1 in terms of who's ratified or rejected, but it only takes 1 to force a national strike, and BMWE is at least as big as the other 5 that have accepted combined. So stay tuned to the rail industry story. It is not over, despite what maybe the White House wanted you to believe. Amazon workers walked off the job in a couple of locations recently, California, Illinois, and Stone Mountain, Georgia. In the fractured landscape of Amazon organizing, each of these are separate independent groups teamed up with local worker centers or union-backed organizing groups, but none have formally affiliated with an existing union. But those relationships are, of course, in flux, so we'll see if any of them do come under one union umbrella. Other strikes to occur, we had Independence, Missouri, and Knoxville, Tennessee among Starbucks locations with strikes, while the continued closure of stores happens in Chicago, Colorado Springs, and elsewhere. So Starbucks Workers United is still going on strike, including right here in the South in Knoxville, Tennessee, Independence, Missouri, and the store itself continues to close those that have voted to unionize. So we'll see how that plays out with Starbucks. The next one is far outside the South, but I wanted to mention it, which is that educators in Malden and Haverhill, Massachusetts, have embarked on 2 illegal teacher strikes after contract negotiations broke down. In Haverhill, a judge has issued a temporary restraining order trying to force the teachers back to work, but it's unclear if they'll comply. So I want to send my solidarity with these brave educators, and may your willingness to defy the law be an example to educators across the country. Also outside the South, the ASFME Local 397 strike at the Philadelphia Museum of Art has come to an end after 19 days on the picket line. Really just wanted to include that one thanks to our regular listener, Infinite Content, who's been keeping us posted on this action. Back home in Alabama, hundreds of paper mill workers with 3 steel workers locals at West Rock down in Cottonton, Alabama, remain locked out. Last week, or actually 2 weeks ago, the Valley Labor Report, we spoke with one of the local presidents. Meanwhile, in Jacksonville, Florida, West Rock workers held an informational picket, and the company announced it's cutting over 100 jobs in St. Paul, Minnesota. There were active transit strike threats across the country last week, including in the South, in Louisville, Kentucky, with ATU Local 1447. And Sarah Jones at New York Magazine has taken a look at the looming Teamsters strike threat at UPS, including interviews with David Levin of Teamsters for a Democratic Union, who said there's a scenario where UPS workers mobilize and they take strike action, and that affects 6% of GDP. And they win a good contract, and that would be a huge labor victory, explained David Levin, the staff director at Teamsters for a Democratic Union, which is a grassroots organization that supported O'Brien and his Teamsters United slate during the recent election. But Levin continued, I think a much bigger dream is that next August 1st, 350,000 UPS workers go on strike to take on the issues that are affecting not just them, but Amazon workers and other workers in this growing sector. So we'll see if the union is in that kind of fighting shape, or if workers in every industry surrounding UPS will also be inspired by this fight. But it definitely could be a game changer.
Having the Teamsters go on strike, the economy would come to an absolute standstill, and
6% of GDP with UPS alone.
Yeah. That that includes tons of flights, tons of drivers, all the support. Probably 75% of Amazon crap is shipped with UPS, and that's a good thing. But every once in a while, you need to slap the capitalists in the face and let them know who runs this country, anyways.
Well, and based on what I'm hearing from the new president of the Teamsters and from a lot of the more militant members in the Teamsters, it sounds like they're gearing up for a big fight.
They're ready, yeah. And that brings to mind, speak with your local UPS driver whenever they come by, especially if they're in Alabama. Ask them if they're in the union, if they're paying dues, and if not, why not? Get them involved.
Yeah, I believe Jacob has been talking with some of the Teamsters here in North Alabama and just trying to build some connections as we prepare for this major contract fight next year.
Yep.
It could be huge.
Yeah, I can tell you they showed up on our picket line whenever we were on strike 4 years ago. So Teamsters are good folks.
They are, absolutely. So transitioning into the political fights, Lauren Kaori Gurley has a profile of the great hope of union lawyers everywhere, NLRB General Counsel Jennifer Abruzzo, where she comes from and what she might deliver. And while it's hard not to feel like this is all just moving way too slow before our wannabe Volker does his wannabe Volker shock, it is worth noting that an NLRB judge did hit Starbucks with a gazelle bargaining order just this week. And speaking of labor boards, federal union leaders from AFGE, IFPTE, and NFFE are calling in labor notes for the confirmation of Ernest Dubester for another term at the head of the Federal Labor Relations Authority, as the agency languishes with a split partisan composition, as the Democrats just can't seem to check this one off their to-do list. And last week, Jacob also mentioned that there was a very good article in the Huffington Post by a friend of the show, Dave Jameson, talking about the Supreme Court case of Glacier Northwest. So highly recommend you check that out. Moving towards internal union politics, the UAW election is officially in full swing, with ballots mailing out to some 1 million active members and retirees. I know my father-in-law, he just got his ballot in the mail yesterday. So for the call, Jane Slaughter and Barry Eidlin break down what's at stake in the vote and why the showdown between the eternally incumbent Administration Caucus and the UAWD Caucus, a driving force behind the one-member, one-vote movement, is so significant. So definitely will be interested to see how the UAW election shakes up. And we don't usually cover corporate moves per se, but the Kroger-Albertsons merger deal is a big deal for labor. The grocery Leviathan would leapfrog UPS to become the largest private sector employer of union members at something like 460,000 workers. Well over 400,000 of whom would be UFCW members across a stunning 500 contracts. The union released a statement, as did the Teamsters, who represent about 18,000 workers at the represented grocery stores. And finally, since this has been one of the biggest labor stories this week, I wanted to add that Amazon Labor Union was unsuccessful in their attempt to organize a second Amazon facility in New York. The ALU lost nearly 2-1, and while I'm sure there are plenty of hot takes flying around about what happened, I want to extend my appreciation and solidarity to all of those involved in that struggle. Please keep your head up. It's worth remembering that we're going to lose some.
Yeah, we're going to lose most.
Yeah. I mean, given the state of our laws, the state of our government, and the immense concentrated power of corporate wealth, almost every union campaign is sort of a David versus Goliath fight. And even more so when we're talking about a scrappy, grassroots, independent, newly formed union taking on one of the most powerful corporations on planet Earth. We're going to have some defeats and we're going to have some setbacks. But to those Amazon workers in New York and all of us working class folks who are watching, we have to remember to pick ourselves up when we get knocked down.
Yeah. Yeah, and those elections, especially with Amazon, get much more coverage than they actually should. And so whenever you get a loss like here in Birmingham and up there in Albany, then it makes the optics look worse than it actually is. I mean, the fact is, we all unions lose most of the, not most, but a majority of the elections that they run. It's it's not like you're not going up against moneyed interest. So, And we don't have money, you know. We got a little bit of money, but nothing compared to corporate America. So you're constantly in a fight.
The imbalance in money, the imbalance in resources overall, the imbalance in the law.
Legislature. It's a nightmare.
The judges, you name it, it's all stacked against us. So we're going to lose, and we're going to lose maybe more than we win. But again, you have to pick yourselves up. You have to pick each other up, dust each other off when you get knocked down. You can't stay down because the other side won't stay down.
Yep.
We have to learn from our failures and our mistakes, and we try again better. So that's what we do. All right, I have one quick hit here before we go to our first break, and I wanted to share some news with you guys. On October 27th and 28th, I'm going to be in Houston, Texas for Power Up, a climate reality training on advocacy and action. And I'm going to quote here from the Climate Reality Project, which is the organization conducting the conference. Quote, "From Florida to Texas, communities along the Gulf Coast have borne a significant brunt of our nation's dependence on fossil fuel energy, with entire communities disrupted by disproportionate placement of polluting infrastructure. This Power Up training will be the first of its kind, connecting those impacted in the Gulf South to build local power together and advance regional climate solutions." So I'm going to go ahead and admit I had never heard of the Climate Reality Project or this summit. I just happened to see it online, and on a whim, I applied. And I really appreciate that they invited me to attend and that they are interested in what a rank-and-file union worker from rural Alabama has to say. My understanding is that this is an organization started by Al Gore. Now, if you know me or you've listened to the show much, you probably know that I have some deep philosophical differences with Gore's politics. But I'm approaching this opportunity with an open mind as a labor activist who is also concerned about the existential crisis of climate change and environmental destruction, and as a father who is concerned about the kind of habitat and the kind of future we're leaving for my daughter and the generations to follow. I will say that it looks to be a fairly young and a very diverse lineup of speakers, most of whom are coming from the South, so that's good. I'm interested in hearing how these conversations around the climate relate to the labor movement specifically and the working class more generally. I'm also curious about the makeup of the conference. Will it be a lot of NGOs? Will it be grassroots activists? What will their politics look like? How different will it be from mine? Perhaps. We'll see. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing stories of everyday people banding together to make positive changes in their community. I'm hoping I hear some of that while I'm there, and I will certainly be providing an update for the show once I get back to share what I learned and what I experienced. And I would love to hear feedback from listeners. That's why I'm sharing this today. I'd love to hear any feedback listeners have. So please share in the chat any thoughts or questions you'd like to pass my way as I prepare to attend. I'm excited to report back on how it goes. And with that, we're going to take a short break. On the other side, we're going to hear from two candidates in next month's election, Independent Jared Budlong for governor and Democrat Will Boyd for Senate. Just a reminder, you can send in a text if you want your voice heard. Send it to 844-899-TVLR. See you on the other side of this break.
Hometown Action is a grassroots organization building a multiracial working class movement for racial, gender, economic, and environmental justice in Alabama's rural communities. We stand in solidarity with Alabama workers and are proud to support the Valley Labor Report's efforts to inform and build the Southern worker movement. Please visit hometownaction.org and follow our social media channels at Hometown Action to learn more about how you too can get involved to make the South a better place for all workers. Solidarity, y'all.
IBW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBW is the right choice.
Energy Alabama is a locally operated and membership-based nonprofit organization focused on advancing Alabama's clean energy future through education and advocacy. Many people in charge of infrastructure and building decisions simply don't know about how viable clean and renewable energy is. To that end, Energy Alabama has provided instruction to more than thousands of adults and tens of thousands of K-12 students across the state. We're working hard to build careers in clean energy and help everyday Alabamians save money on their utility bills. Learn more about our work and how you can join us at energyalabama.org.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136 out of Central Alabama. Learn more at ibew136.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you're listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Adam Keller, and my co-host today is David Story, filling in for Jacob Morrison. If you have anything to add, feel free to chat in on YouTube or Facebook, or send us a text at 844-899-TVLR. All right, folks, so just me and David today in the show. We've got a couple candidate interviews we're going to play from coming up next. We've got some important elections in just a couple of weeks, so we are continuing our series of candidate interviews to talk to folks running for office and ask what kind of message they have for working class voters. These candidate interviews are released in full as standalone podcasts wherever you find your podcasts, and they're also released in full on our YouTube channel at the Valley Labor Report. Today we're going to play excerpts from two of these interviews. Up first is Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate, Will Boyd.
The Reverend Dr. Will Boyd running for U.S. Senate. So, what is it that makes you interested in supporting unions? Where did you get that, that inclination, and how have you been being received at these union events?
Well, I come from a family where there are a lot of white collar workers, a lot of veterans, but I also have a lot of blue collar workers in the family. I watched my grandfather work at Dixie Cup back in the day. It would have been where you have all of your paper plates, paper cups made. He was probably someone who didn't have more than a third or fourth grade education, but he went on to become, in my mind, one of the smartest people. I'm not just saying that. I mean, I hold an engineering, but he could pretty much break down anything and then put it back together again. So he was in a high ranking place with that company for many years as well. So that blue blood, I guess, is there from a different perspective, not talking about law enforcement in this case. I'm talking about labor. So I've been around labor quite a bit, even in my lifetime after graduating from college. I was able to work in union environments. Tool and die makers were very good friends of mine because I, of course, ran even assembly lines that had 300 and 400 people affiliated with them in some type of way. I had people who were affiliated with boiler makers unions, United Steel workers, and others who affiliated with, obviously working with the material that came into my plant. I was around them even on Fridays as a manager, an operations manager, engineer. I had the opportunity to sit in union meetings. So union stewards, shop stewards, union presidents, and I were very close. I probably had a totally different relationship with the union than most, because I believed in listening to people. I guess that's part of my pastoral side, part of my clinical psychology side, if you would, in the Christian world. I just believe in that you should listen to people and understand where they're coming from, what their concerns are. So that all being said, I've stood up with unions in arbitration meetings, remediation, looking at the National Labor Review Board materials. I've actually stood with unions and made sure we battled, or at least made sure we stopped what would be called misclassification. So when you talk about Davis-Bacon and prevailing wage and PLAs, FMLA, or any of these acronyms, Davis-Bacon, and I bring up all these different names. Most people who are watching obviously know what I'm talking about. These are familiar to me because I've just sat with secretary treasurers like yourself. I've sat with union presidents. I've sat with people at all levels of unions and just talked to them about what they need and tried to help them fight. Of course, Senator Jones and I, people like Steve Stutz, the International Union of Operating Engineers, and I could run through all these unions, but we've just partnered together and tried to go around to different union shops and talk to people and see what their needs are or what they desire. When I go out to hang out with coal miners, I don't go out to speak. I don't go out to make any speeches. I go out just to serve food, work in the pantry, put together, help bag up groceries. When people have questions, I answer them from a political perspective. But generally speaking, we're talking about people who've been on strike 18 months. People who would really like to see their lives go back to some level of normalcy. So I'm just trying to help them get their voice to be heard, and whatever that takes, I'm willing to do. I'm even willing to put this candidacy on the line, this nomination on the line, if you would, and just help even bring mediation for the coal miners. So when you mention the paper plant, paper mill, and others who are possibly facing strikes, scabs, as we call them, being dealt with, those are just issues that I really hate that they have to go through when negotiations fail. But it's important for the union worker to be heard. We want to hear that people are making realistic wages. We want to hear that people have an opportunity to work in safe conditions. We want to hear that people have their voices being heard whenever there's something that is not compliant or not going right for them. So these are things that we need more of. I think if we had managers to talk to union workers more often, we would see a lot less strikes, a lot less contracts really been breached, violated, and I just think the world would be a better place. So that's who I am. I'm just a friend of labor.
What are, let's say, the top 3 issues that that you're running on, that if we give you a magic wand, you get done your first day in office?
Well, the economy is very important to people. We could talk about whether people are pro-life, pro-choice, whether between. We could talk about other issues that relate to what's on the table right now, but everything seems to go back to the economy first. And you can have people who have a lot of desires to purchase things, to do things, but without the economy being where it needs to be, really building the economy from the ground up, from the middle out, people aren't free to go about their days and do well. I keep saying I'm trying to be a voice. I'm trying to be a voice so every Alabamian has a shot at the American dream. I want to see every person who is in that working class able to go out and earn eventually that realistic living wage where they can take care of their family. It bothers me in Alabama that we have, in some cases, by some measurements, 800,000 people in poverty. It bothers me that we have a regressive grocery tax. It bothers me that we're looking at very low, even record unemployment in Alabama, but we're also seeing where there will be thousands of jobs that will go unfilled because people don't have the right skill sets. So we want to see, as it relates to the economy, that there are taxes that are cut. We want to see our workforce actually support it. We want to see the modernization of infrastructure. We want to see the detangling of regulations. I mean, these are things that are important, developing energy resources, but for the most part, when you get the economy moving, especially coming out of a punishing pandemic and people are able to go to work, we're better off. So number one, the economy. Number two, education continues to rise to the top. Education is important because people want to know that if they're going to go to a trade center, or if they're going to be in a dual credit program, if they're going to leave high school and go off into the trades, that they have an ability to train with some group of people, jump straight into that apprenticeship or that chairman's role, master role at some point in time, own their own business in the future. We want to make sure those educational opportunities are there. So I talk about K being fully funded, talk about preschools, I talk about primary, secondary learning, talk about the fact that we need to fully fund HBCUs, historically Black colleges, universities, community colleges. But I've often talked about that blue collar revival. And with that blue collar revival, working with labor, partnering with businesses, you can be pro-business and pro-labor at the same time. I believe we'll see that economy shift. And that's all because of the educational, exceptional educational process that I'm trying to push forward.
When we are, thinking about some labor-related issues, some union-related issues that might come before the U.S. Senate, obviously top of mind is going to be the PRO Act. I'm assuming that I think it'd be a safe assumption to say that you would support the PRO Act.
Absolutely. I'm surprised I didn't even say that already. Yes, the protecting the rights to organize is very important to me. It's something I've fought for years. I believe people need to organize, they need to bargain collectively. Just like people want to codify Roe v. Wade, you want to see in the PRO Act the codification of what's called the ABC test as it relates to a contractor. You want to make sure that there are no intimidating meetings, and they have several different names. Sometimes businesses have a tendency to try to bust unions or stop unions from starting by having these meetings where they intimidate, where they call people in and then tell everything about people like me and why they should not organize or have a contract even drawn up. There's also, with the PRO Act, where we desire to see what the same tools and resources inside of a business that are used to disseminate emails to employees can also be used by labor unions, so that we don't have to start off trying to pull names together and build lists, but it's all there. Again, there are a number of things that are in this PRO Act that are important, but as a person of color myself, I can tell you that people of color who are in unions typically make more than those people of color who are outside of them. Right now in the state of Alabama alone, we're seeing where we have really the lowest unemployment, really the lowest labor participation out there. And if my numbers serve me correctly, and I don't want to mess anything up for you today as far as the stats are concerned, but I believe union membership is about 5.9%. And if we were to look at the numbers, actually right now, I think there are about 115,000 union members, people who are card-carrying union members in Alabama. But regrettably, I want to say in the last year, there are around 18,000 people who enjoyed union benefits without being a part of a union. So Alabama tends to be a right-to-work state. But even though you have a right-to-work state, people try to stop labor unions from doing what they want to do, even through the PRO Act. And while people that you and I know well, people who are in labor, were probably not as optimistic that the bill will push through, we have to be able to at least break it up into some sections and say, perhaps if not the PRO Act this time, maybe it's a different name, but we make sure we keep pressing forward. You asked earlier about why do you keep running? You know, you don't quit. If the PRO Act in its entirety now is not enjoyed, not pushed through, not passed, don't stop. Go back and offer another bill. You know, we started with this infrastructure bill which was bipartisan. We talked about a Build Back Better plan. There were several steps to get us to where we are with the Inflation Reduction Act, now law, right? So it requires people not giving up, people like the union leaders, people like our friends in Brookwood that continue to fight, even though it looks like an uphill battle. You don't quit. You keep, some of the people get on the line every morning at 4:30 and they stay on as long as they can. They're called the crew. We just have to have a crew of people, even in the Senate, like myself, who are committed to pushing for certain parts. We want it all, right? But at least certain parts of the PRO Act still being pushed forward, even if certain parts get kicked back.
All right, so that was Democratic candidate for Senate Will Boyd. That's someone that David and I are both pretty familiar with. We've known for many years and appreciate that he's willing to run. At least folks do have a choice on the ballot for the Senate. And coming up next, we have a little bit different candidate, Jared Budlong. He's running as an independent, as a write-in candidate for governor. As you may know, the ballot access in the state of Alabama is awful. When it comes to third-party and independent candidates getting on the ballot, it's extremely difficult in the state of Alabama. I know that's one of the issues that Mr. Budlong is trying to bring attention to in his campaign. So coming up next, Jared Budlong running as an independent for governor.
I have with me independent write-in candidate for governor, Jared Budlong. As a practical matter, to subject criminals, you know, quote unquote, to this egregious treatment is not good for the rest of us, because we know that, what is it? You may know that because it seems like you're deeper in this issue than I am, but it's something like 95%, 97% of people in Alabama's prisons are gonna be back out on the street, right? And so, and that's the way that even the most hardened, you know, like, I hate criminals, tough on crime guy out there, he's not gonna say that you should do life, even for violent assault. Even if you shoot somebody and you blow their knee out, right? They're not gonna say you should do life in prison for that. Nobody's gonna say that, right? And that's
very few.
And that's a terrible thing to blow somebody's knee out, right? But you know, proportionality I think is important, and proportionality would dictate that 97% of these people are going to be back out on the streets at some point. And so how are we preparing them to re-enter society? Well, we are preparing these people to re-enter society as gang members, as drug addicts, as people who can't get gainful employment because they have a felony on their record. I mean, the whole system is it is not designed to help the people who are accused of crimes or anybody else for that matter. It's just designed to oppress people.
Yeah, it's a punitive system, and that we should have learned in the last 300 or 400 years that doesn't do anything, because we have been putting more people in prison over those years. Now that it ebbs and flows, and I'll admit that in our state, we saw a decline in incarcerated individuals for a bit, and it started to go back up. And that's partially due to our recidivism rate, which you mentioned. People leave, but in Alabama, we have a 30% recidivism rate on average, and that's only counting 3 years post being reintroduced into society. So if we only count the first 3 years, it's still 30%. So I'm curious. I don't think the data is available that the state will give us because they're not transparent on a lot. I would be curious what that looks like at 15 or 20 or 25 years and see how high that rate is, because 30% is bad enough. And if we're only counting 3 years, like it should be obvious to the public that our system isn't doing what we've been told it's supposed to do, which is corrections or rehabilitation. That's not what it's doing. And I don't think that's what it's ever been intended to do. And I'll introduce that with one stat. Our first prison, as we know them now in Alabama, was built in Wetumpka in 1844. And 4 years later, they started selling the labor of those who were incarcerated. So since 1848, we have been selling incarcerated individuals' labor as a state. It's never been about rehabilitation. It has always been about labor.
And so what is the, to what degree can the governor unilaterally fix some of these issues? What are some of the things that you would do, day one type stuff? And then what are some of the things that are going to have to be legislative fixes that you would have to get broader public support for?
Yeah, most of it's legislative, and I'm fully aware of that. And I try to make sure everyone that I talk to, especially those who are either inside right now or their loved ones, I try to let them know I can't fix most of the things that you're seeing. And thankfully they're catching on. But there are some things that I would like to do first day. And a lot of that's to address the current conditions. So right now, Alabama is currently being sued by the federal government, by the DOJ, for the conditions of our prisons. And this is the second time that has happened. It happened in the late 70s, early 80s for similar conditions. And we didn't fix it on our own then. So the federal government took over our prisons back in the late 80s. And we're in a very similar situation now where people are dying on a nearly daily basis from drug overdoses, assault. We've got unalivings, self-unalivings. I don't know how we want to phrase that here on the radio, but people taking their own life. And the danger isn't only to the incarcerated individuals. It's actually not safe for the staff that work there, mostly because they are understaffed. They're actually, the last count that I saw was about a third of the necessary staff is what they have on hand. And that makes it dangerous for everybody. So the first thing I would like to do when coming in is actually fulfill the purpose and keep people safe there by, and it sounds extreme and I'm fully aware, declaring a state of emergency, because that's where we're at. We have people dying on a nearly daily basis. It's a very, very defined group of people who are in danger on a daily basis. So we're declaring a state of emergency and bringing in the National Guard to fill in the gaps until we can get it safe enough to then actually hire people through the normal channels, and then let the National Guard, go back to doing their thing and let them go back into being reservists, right? We don't need them there all the time or full time, but I want to fill the gaps in staffing, but also have some extra oversight. Right now there's a problem with corruption and there's a problem with contraband making it into the prisons. And it was happening even at the height of COVID, which means there were no visitations, and yet things were still getting in. And from what I've heard from those who are on the inside and their loved ones, it was correctional officers, but also things being able to be snuck over a fence or tossed over a fence because there were staffing shortages. They weren't seeing that stuff being brought in. And, we have got to address that. And part of that is having enough people. So that's kind of what I want to do firsthand. Moving from there, a lot of it is legislative. The Board of Pardon and Paroles needs to be reined in as best I can. And that's a tricky one. I'm not sure, how deep you want to go into it, because we could go pretty deep into this conversation, but I know we're limited on time. So
One of the things that the Republican supermajority is trying to push through on education that we saw in the last session, and we will almost certainly see in the next session, and probably with even more fervor than last time, because it's at the beginning of a quadrennium, and so the pressure is the least amount that they will have over the 4 years, because they are farthest away from an election, farthest away from accountability, is what they call school choice, what is in actuality school privatization. What is your if the school choice bill, quote unquote, that they had last session passed, is that something that you would sign as governor?
If I'm remembering it correctly, we're talking about school vouchers and giving people the ability to take their funding that they would normally get through the process we were just talking about and choose where they put that funding. I would not sign it. It doesn't mean it wouldn't pass anyway. So this will be a shameless plug to make sure you're voting for your local representatives, not just the governor, but make sure you're voting people in who believe similarly to you and in your local area. But no, I don't support school vouchers. I've gotten into a couple heated discussions about charter schools because I see them as a stopgap measure currently. I don't dislike the schools themselves. The concern is, we're not putting funding where it should be, which is why they exist. So the problem isn't the charter school, it's actually the funding issues currently. It's not, we're getting mad at the Band-Aid that we don't like the look of or the feel of, rather than the wound that's underneath. And I would rather focus on the actual problem.
Energy Alabama supports consumers and is a leader in advocating for them. We have been able to successfully fight off utility rate increases in the state, reduce fees for electric vehicles, increase electric vehicle infrastructure spending, and secured a $100 million refund by Alabama Power after the utility overcharged customers for fuel. To learn more about our work advocating for customers and join the fight, go to energyalabama.org.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBW558.org.
North Alabama DSA is looking for folks to work for a better North Alabama. They prioritize mutual aid, municipal activism, and union solidarity. Contact them on social media or dsanorthalabama@gmail for more information.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Hometown Action is a grassroots organization building a multiracial working class movement for racial, gender, economic, and environmental justice in Alabama's rural communities. We stand in solidarity with Alabama workers and are proud to support the Valley Labor Report's efforts to inform and build the Southern worker movement. Please visit hometownaction.org and follow our social media channels at Hometown Action to learn more about how you too can get involved to make the South a better place for all workers. Solidarity, y'all.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Adam Keller, here with my co-host David Story, filling in for Jacob Morrison today. If you have anything to add, don't forget to send us a text at 844-899-TVLR. All right, folks. So we've had a packed show today. We're doing our best. Just me and David here in the studio, doing our best to maintain with technical glitches and all those sorts of things, but not too bad. We've talked a little bit about the Labor Notes Troublemaker School from last weekend, last week in Southern Labor. I mentioned that I'll be attending a climate summit in Houston coming up later this month. Then we heard from 2 candidates in next month's election, Will Boyd for the Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate, and Jared Budlong, who is an independent write-in candidate for governor of Alabama. So it was interesting to hear what they have to say. I was telling David off the air that I appreciate Jared Budlong using his platform to try to educate folks about Alabama politics. Obviously, being a write-in candidate, we cannot expect that he's going to win or even make a sizable impact on the final outcome. But it seems like he's connecting people, he's educating people, he's talking to people in a very plain fashion, talking to us like regular folks, and I appreciate that. So my encouragement to Jared would be to stick around and see if you can get your name on the ballot as an independent 4 years from now. Because right now you're building a base of support that could be your base of support to get you on the ballot next time. Because it's going to require a lot of signatures, a lot of folks, beating the bushes with a clipboard and a pen. And maybe the folks you're talking to now can help you make that happen next time. So I want to switch gears here and talk about labor's rising tide in Alabama. There's a resurgent labor movement in the United States, and Sweet Home, Alabama is at the heart of this worker organizing. Let's check in on the major labor actions happening across the state, starting south and working our way up. Starting with Mobile, there is a strike threat among dock workers in Mobile represented by International Longshoremen's Association, ILA, Local 1410. We know how important dock workers are and how important the Port of Mobile is to the supply chain. My understanding was that October 20th was the deadline for contract negotiations. So this story is still developing. Stay tuned next week for more details. Solidarity with the dock workers. In Auburn, there's an active union campaign with CWA at the GE Aviation plant, with the campaign going public in August. There's already been unfair labor practice, or ULP, charges filed, with multiple pro-union workers fired for what they believe was retaliation for their pro-union activity. That includes at least one worker who was pregnant. So stay tuned on that fight. We have a paper mill lockout in South Alabama. Members of the United Steelworkers who work at paper mills near Fort Mitchell, Alabama, have been locked out after rejecting multiple contract offers from the company as they try to hold on to excessive overtime penalties. If you can only read one thing on this, I highly recommend our very own Jacob Morrison's piece with the Real News Network titled "Alabama Paper Mill Workers Want Their Lives Back, and they're giving up $30,000 to get it." We also interviewed one of the local presidents on October 8th that you can find on our YouTube channel. These workers are fighting to protect their time, protect their family lives, and protect their safety. They're fighting to hold on to hard-won benefits that workers across the country have already lost. So a lot of set of eyes will be on this struggle. Back in early August, I believe it was, we saw some wildcat public sector strikes in Lowndes County and Selma City, primarily over the need for a living wage. We'll be looking to report back on how that fight unfolds. October 1st marked 18 months on strike in Brookwood, with over 1,000 UMWA sisters and brothers holding the line against Warrior Met Coal. Of course, we've talked extensively over the past 18 months about this strike. And David, I believe you actually had some good news to mention about the strike regarding their Christmas list. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it just goes to show the solidarity among those of us on the left. Whenever Jacob reached out to me, I guess about 2 weeks ago, about coming in and helping with the show, I thought I would get some people know. Most people that follow the show probably know Bo of the Fifth Column. He does a YouTube show on a lot of issues, you know, that general everyday working people have. But he's helped support the labor movement whenever we've called. And so I just reached out to him and said, "Hey, would you come on the show and help us raise some money for the UMWA strike for the Christmas presents for these kids?" And he was like, "Yeah, I don't think that I can be there Saturday morning, but we can do like a pre-recorded show and raise some money." And then like 2 days later, he had already raised all the money for the.
That's nice.
Nice. Everything that they had on their list was paid for by his audience. So yeah, I mean, he's
fantastic.
A great guy. He'll do just bend over backwards for us and all of our folks. And he's in the Panhandle. He's right around just south of Dothan and in Florida. So he's kind of local to us. If you're interested in that type of politics, Bo is a good one to follow because he boils everything down to just average, everyday American speak, and he's just probably one of the best guys that I know on YouTube.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, love to hear that. Love to hear that the kids of these striking miners are going to have a good Christmas this year. So, you know, shout out Bo of the Fifth Column and to everyone else who has donated and contributed to the strike pantry and the strike funds for UMWA.
Yeah.
And y'all, don't forget about Bessemer, where RWDSU's campaign at an Amazon warehouse was one of the early touchstones of the labor revival, both here and nationwide. You'll remember the first vote was held in spring 2021. The union was unsuccessful, but due to Amazon's flagrant cheating, a revote was held in March. The results are too close to call, with the union down, but with enough votes, 416, being challenged that could swing the outcome to either the yes or no side. So the outcome is still up in the air. We know RWDSU is still there and still organizing, and we send them our love and solidarity.
Yeah.
Also up in the air is the result of a Starbucks union drive in Scottsboro. The election for Starbucks Workers United ended in a tie, but also with challenged ballots that we believe would be yes votes if they are counted. Earlier this year, a Starbucks in Birmingham was successful in its union campaign, making it the first unionized Starbucks in Alabama. We'll be looking to report back on how things go with first contract negotiations, especially considering the egregious behavior of Starbucks. Let's see. In August, AL.com reported that Huntsville Utilities employees were seeking to organize with IBEW 558. The workers packed out that week's Huntsville City Council meeting. IBEW seeking a Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, with management. While not as extensive as a collective bargaining agreement, which faces certain legal restrictions in the public sector in Alabama, securing an MOU, as IBEW has done in several other places, would be a significant step forward for these workers. And just this month, the organizing Huntsville Utilities workers received a declaration of support from the local progressive activist community. The Tennessee Valley Progressive Alliance sent a letter to IBEW 558 expressing their solidarity with the workers, their support of the organizing effort, and their offer of assistance as the campaign unfolds. I'm proud to be a part of the Tennessee Valley Progressive Alliance, and I really meant the words we wrote in that letter. We know not all of those workers are going to jive with all of TVPA's politics, and that's okay. It's about building solidarity and being willing to show up for one another because it's the right thing to do. So to any Huntsville Utilities workers or IBEW members listening, know that a lot of folks support your effort. We recognize that you deserve a voice and that the entire community benefits when you get it. Don't hesitate to let us know how we can help. And there was other good news, especially at the local level. Back on Labor Day, our very own Jacob Morrison was on WFF 48 talking about the local growth of unions. He told Megan Plotka, quote, "The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, has tripled their apprenticeship classes over the last 2 years. Their membership has grown 20% over the last 2 years. IBEW 558, covering North Alabama, is already the biggest trade union in the state. They have thousands of members. Ironworkers 477 out of Muscle Shoals. In just the last 2 months, they have tripled their apprenticeship classes. They have doubled their membership in the last 2 years." And while I don't believe it made it into the segment, I do know Jacob also shared with them that the North Alabama Labor Council is growing, with new unions affiliating or in the process of affiliating with the council. Always love to see more collaboration between the unions in our community. That's huge.
Yep.
I'm proud to be one of several new members added this summer to Huntsville Stagehand Union, IATSE 900. There were RWDSU poultry workers in Decatur who saw a 20% pay increase in their most recent contract negotiations. We talked to them earlier this year. CWA 3905 in Huntsville has been organizing in their workplace to defend remote work, among other things, and you can listen to our interview with their local president, Mustafa, from a while back. The machinists out at ULA in Decatur, Local 44, were successful in getting a good contract earlier this year after authorizing a strike and preparing in case one was necessary. We had multiple segments covering the contract campaign if you want to go back and hear more. And these are just the top stories that come to mind here in the Tennessee Valley. I'm sure we've missed some. All of this comes amid some promising news nationally. NLRB filings for new union elections are up, and new Gallup polling indicates over 70% of the American public supports unions. So, moving to a labor struggle with statewide impact, incarcerated workers in prisons all across Alabama have been striking for better working and living conditions and for criminal justice reform. A lot of the reporting we've seen has come from the Alabama Political Reporter, especially John Glenn, who we interviewed in the lead-up to the strike, as well as 1 week into it. More recently from the Alabama Political Reporter, Jacob Holmes writes, quote, "The Alabama Department of Corrections on Monday declared an end to the incarcerated workers' strike and protest that has affected every major correctional facility in the state over the previous 3 weeks. Reports from inmates contradict ADOC assertions that things have gone back to normal. But backing up, on Friday, October 14th, we saw a significant protest in Montgomery. I reached out to a friend of the show who was in attendance, who said that the rally was really well attended. Ivy appeared to come to the window several times. It was announced during the rally that ADOC was returning all prisons to 3 meals a day. Also on Friday the 14th, the incarcerated workers released a statement where they resolved to continue advocating for change and highlighted reports of retaliation. There have been multiple deaths recently reported across the correction system, including multiple deaths confirmed right here at the Limestone County facility. There was a powerful statement in the Montgomery Advertiser this week that in the month of July, more people died in prisons than were granted parole. I mean, just think about that. You're more likely to leave prison in a body bag than through the parole process. It's just astounding. Meanwhile, Alabama has been under additional legal scrutiny and national media spotlight regarding its execution practices. A federal appeals court judge literally called it a mess. The incarcerated workers went on strike because, frankly, they are facing a humanitarian crisis. Alabama has one of the highest incarceration rates in the United States, which has the highest incarceration rate in the world. That means inside the borders of Alabama, we lock up more human beings per capita than almost anywhere else on planet Earth. The lasting impact of white supremacy, so-called tough-on-crime laws and judges, backwards drug policies, persistent poverty and underinvestment, lack of rehabilitation, all of these things and more have resulted in the current crisis with violent, overcrowded, inhumane prisons which are under federal investigation. Things are so bad staffing-wise inside the prisons that an attorney who spoke with Huntsville's Way 31 believed that many corrections officers have been sympathetic, if not outright supportive, of the inmate work stoppage and protest. Despite the scale of the crisis garnering national attention, Alabama's political leadership has been completely inadequate in its response, to nobody's surprise. Governor Ivey's statements were dismissive and ignorant. Right-wing media has framed the prisoners' demands as outlandish, and most of Alabama's political representatives have said nothing at all. But the fight continues. Here in North Alabama, the Huntsville Bail Fund, along with close to a dozen other local organizations, have published an open letter to Alabama leadership calling for marijuana law reform in light of the strike and President Biden's recent actions, and calling for Alabama to address the strike demands around reforming parole and sentencing. It's my understanding that protests will continue in Montgomery as well. So stay tuned as this struggle unfolds. If you haven't already, please reach out to your legislator as well as Governor Ivey to share your concerns about the prison crisis and ask that they listen to the cries for help from Alabama's incarcerated population. And lastly, in this segment, I wanted to include a couple stories that don't necessarily feature labor organizing per se, but do feature labor abuse and corporate misdeeds. So we're going to start with the automobile company Hyundai, which is facing reports of child labor at multiple facilities in Alabama. This week, there were some new developments. The COO claimed that they're doing an investigation, that they're going to stop doing business with the staffing agencies that they're blaming for this issue. There were some fines and penalties that were levied by both the state and federal Department of Labor, which Jacob reported on last week. And there's also some concerns being expressed by UAW that maybe some of these penalties are going to end up actually harming the workers involved and not so much the company. So we'll see how things play out there. But at the end of the day, it's just bizarre to see in the year 2022 multiple facilities with a modern car manufacturer like Hyundai using child labor. And the Attorney General of Alabama knew about it for months and said and did nothing.
Bizarre, bizarre is not even a term that it don't even fade,
Well, there's some words I'd love to say about it, and Mr. Marshall that I probably shouldn't say on FM radio.
Yeah, the fact that the state government knew that kids as young as 11 to 13 were working in an industrial environment. This wasn't Johnny or somebody helping his dad on the farm. This was a factory that produces vehicle parts.
Which has been sanctioned previously because of safety issues in the workplace.
From amputees. Yeah.
Right. People literally losing limbs.
Yeah. And we've got 11 and 13-year-old kids from Guatemala, Honduras, and places like that. You know, these so-called right-wing reactionaries want to keep all of the supposed illegal immigrants out of the state unless they're contributing to the economic impact with their children. You know, just a year or so ago, I think it was a 15-year-old young man from somewhere around Guatemala, El Salvador, something like that, fell through a roof in Coleman doing roofing work and died. You know, and just another blip on the radar for all these folks. Nobody cares.
Yeah, I mean, and don't come at me and say that you're pro-life and that you're about children when you have nothing to say when there's child labor happening right inside of our state.
Yeah.
In multiple facilities. Not just one, but more than one. I mean, that's just, it's extreme. And that's not the only one I had to report on today. We're going to finish up with a company that's as common in Alabama as houndstooth and sweet tea, and I'm talking about Dollar General. You can't hardly drive a mile in any direction these days before running into a Dollar General. So I'm going to quote at length here from the Associated Press. Quote, Dollar General is facing another $1.68 million in fines after government safety inspectors found violations in 4 of the chain's stores in Alabama, Florida, and Georgia, the federal regulators announced Monday. During inspections in April 2022, OSHA found dirty and disorderly storage areas and materials stacked unsafely at locations in Mobile and Grove Hill, Alabama, Tampa, Florida, and Dewey Rose, Georgia. OSHA said those conditions put workers at risk of slipping, tripping, and getting struck by falling objects. The company was also cited for fire hazards, including failing to keep exit routes and electrical panels clear and unobstructed, and neglecting to mount and label fire extinguishers. The announcement came 2 months after OSHA announced $1.3 million in proposed penalties for similar violations at 3 of Dollar General stores in Georgia. OSHA said Dollar General has faced more than $9.6 million in initial penalties after 182 inspections since 2017. We will, quote, we will use our full enforcement powers to hold Dollar General accountable for its ongoing pattern of behavior until they show that they take worker safety seriously, said Assistant Secretary for Occupational Safety and Health Doug Parker in a statement. Dollar General, based in Goodlettsville, Tennessee, has 15 business days to comply or contest the penalties. The company did not immediately reply to a request for comment. And that's all from the Associated Press. So we've got Hyundai in the news. Now we've got Dollar General in the news. It's for one thing, it's good to see penalties. I will say that. Pleasantly surprised to see some accountability. But it's never the level of accountability that working class people face from the system.
So you say that's the truth. How many of them's going to prison in the state?
Right.
You know, how many of them's missing meals because of the strike the last few weeks? And, you know, nobody ever. That's the biggest issue with the state. The state, and when I say the state, I don't mean just the state of Alabama, but the state in general, relying on them is there's no personal accountability for these managers, for these supervisors, for these HR folks, for the business owners themselves. There's never any personal accountability when they break the law.
Right.
It's you know, and we sound like a broken record, but there's a reason why the OSHA and places like this are never in a union facility, because the workers take care of the facility. They understand the laws, they understand their rights, and you don't have issues like this. It's only in non-union facilities where you have to have the state come in and intervene.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, because in a union environment, you as the members, you as the rank and file workers have a responsibility and a right to enforce that contract, right? And to hold management accountable for complying with the contract, for complying with state and federal laws. And that's what you do. And when you have issues on the job that are putting people at risk, that are hurting people, the union's there to fight it.
Yep.
And that's why they want to keep the unions out of these companies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as a even as a right wing person, you know, even like some of these idiots that's on the radio station after us, the ones that profess that they want limited government. Well, the one way to get limited government is to put workers in charge and quit having to rely on government regulations to oversee these things. What's the first thing that happened at the after the UMWA went on strike? They discharged all the scabs came in. They discharged all that coal, whatever the coal dust is, into the frickin' Black Warrior River.
Right.
You know, what's the first thing? Because these guys are getting bussed in from Kentucky, from West Virginia, from Pennsylvania. They don't care about our standard of living here in the state. They don't care about us fishing our waters, our natural resources. All they care about is making $1. The folks that are working here care.
Right. It's their community. It's their neighborhood. It's their way of life.
And they're protected if they do see something and say something. They're not concerned about getting fired because they know they're doing the right thing and they know the union's going to stand up behind them and protect them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's so much misconduct that happens out there in the workplace because people are fearful of retaliation, because people lack a union backing and a lack of union contract to protect them, and so therefore they don't say anything. They suffer in silence, or they resign rather than deal with it. But it's a big problem, and that's why I think it was important that I wanted to talk today about the rising tide of labor in Alabama, because there is one, and it's spreading from Mobile to Huntsville, and I think now's the time to get involved. If you don't have a union yet in your workplace, now's a good time to start having the conversations.
Yep.
So we're going to be wrapping up here in the next couple minutes. I do have some plugs here at the end as we're wrapping up on FM radio. Just a reminder that we will be continuing the conversation online. So we go off the radio at 11 a.m., but we'll still be online on Facebook and YouTube. We've got Warren Tidwell from Hometown Action coming on. We got some other stuff planned. So definitely stay tuned online after we wrap on FM radio. Also want to remind people that you can support our UMWA sisters and brothers in Brookwood by supporting the Strike Pantry at paypal.me/UMWA Strike Pantry. October 24th is the deadline to register to vote in time for the November election. Please double check your registration status and polling place while you have time. Just Google it. Go ahead, do it between now and the 24th. Friday, November 4th, United Women of Color Huntsville will be hosting an event titled Protest and Silencing at 7 p.m. at UAH's Morton Hall. Join for a discussion on the different ways oppressed groups have their protests silenced and how you can resist. Labor Notes has a series of online trainings. Right now they're doing some Saturday Secrets of a Successful Organizer workshop. October 22nd, 29th, and November 5th, all online, all on Saturdays. And Labor Notes also has a webinar coming up on October 26th called Mexican State Journalist, 1,000 Days on Strike and Repressed. That should be interesting. Leave us a voicemail at 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. You can buy our hat or give us a donation at tvlr.fm. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the Valley Labor Report. Again, we'll be staying on the air live on Facebook and YouTube after we go off WVNN at 11. Stay tuned. Looking forward to a conversation with Warren from Hometown Action. Labor shall rule. All power to the workers. right, folks. I think we're off the air on WVNN on FM radio. I believe we should just be online only at this point. If you have stayed tuned with us, I really appreciate it. Those of you listening on Facebook, those of you listening on YouTube, really appreciate that. Thanks for everyone who's been chatting in.
Shout out to Christopher Colton for the $10 donation.
Hell yeah. Thanks, Christopher. I really appreciate that. Yeah, we've had some good conversations happening. Looks like, can't say I've been able to follow it too closely because I'm doing my best here, folks. But really appreciate all of you who chat in and have those conversations. I see Ron and William, some familiar faces there in the chat. So thanks, y'all. Appreciate it. Keep it coming. Appreciate the donation. We have Warren from Hometown Action's about to come on. Let me get him set up. So we'll take a very brief break, not a full break, just a very brief break to get Warren set up here, and then we'll pick it up where we left off on Overtime.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party explorer. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Yeah, y'all hear me okay?
All right, folks. So I think we're back. I think
back.
we have Warren on the line. Again, apologies for the technical difficulties. We had a computer crash right during our transition. But we are back. It's overtime with the Valley Labor Report.
And yes, Warren is driving down the interstate, talking to us while doing 80 miles an hour.
That's right.
I'm sitting still, I promise.
So, Warren, thank you for being on here. Thank you for your time and for all you do. Wanted to have you on to talk about a couple things. First, I wanted you to sort of reintroduce yourself. You've been a longtime friend of the show, but it's been quite a while since you've been on the air, I believe. You were one of the many volunteers who helped with last year's Strike Fest. We run into you at all the various functions across the state, but tell us about your background and, what got you into activism and organizing.
I often say it's a moral imperative now, but go ahead and give you my intro. I'm Warren Tidwell. I'm Community Resilience Coordinator for Hometown Action and Hometown Organizing Project. I'm a former mechanic who has somehow found a way to do community organizing and, keep the lights on. I'm actually out in Camp Hill, Alabama today. That's why I'm coming to you from my car.
Right on. What are you doing out in Camp Hill?
Camp Hill, Alabama's in Tallapoosa County. It's northwest of me in Auburn. And I was invited in by some of the local folks here who want to do some community building work. Camp Hill is no different than a lot of communities in Alabama. The industries have gone, the businesses have gone. And, after the folks, they extracted what they could from the people here, they moved on. And so this is a town that is north of 50% below the poverty line. But there are some wonderful folks here doing good work. And of course, with Hometown Action, we seek to support that. And we seek to support the work that's going on. I used to say that I work in a lot of places where nobody's doing anything or nothing's going on. And that's just not the case. I mean, there's wonderful folks in every one of these communities who are trying their best to do what they can for their communities.
Right on. So what kind of activism and organizing have you been involved in? Like, what are the kind of things that you're doing in communities like Camp Hill?
Oh, goodness. This is a food desert. And so we originally set out to talk to folks and find out what their desires are for their communities, right? So they informed the work. And a big thing here was that there was this food desert, I think 30 minutes to the nearest grocery store, impoverished community. So we now have a local individual who has started a weekly marketplace, farmers market, got everybody set up with the vouchers to get fresh fruit and vegetables who are eligible here in the community. So it's a small thing, but it really isn't in the fact that they didn't have this before.
Right.
So that's a small part of it. But I mean, you name it. I mean, we've got so many working groups in Hometown Action. I do the community resilience work, but we've got folks out there with our healthcare working group who are advocating for, Medicare for all, expanding Medicaid, these issues of having all of our rural hospitals closed, and trying to get into communities and, seek ways that we can support folks when it comes to that. As you very well know, I'm a big advocate for unions, support a lot of union organizers. I've gotten to know so many wonderful folks in Brookwood through the Warrior Met Strike over there. And of course, been working with y'all on that. So wherever there's a need in these small communities and we can support the folks doing that work, we're going to try and be there.
Yeah, awesome. And, Hometown Action has been a sponsor of the Valley Labor Report for quite some time. We've had several of y'all on the show. And you've shared a little bit about what y'all do and your emphasis. But for those people who are just like totally not familiar, they maybe never heard of Hometown Action before today. Tell us, what is the focus of the organization, and how do y'all operate? What kind of organization is this?
Well, we're all about the collective effort across these rural communities, and we seek to connect these communities and the people within them to be able to support each other. But
it is about empowering folks to rebuild what they can in their communities, to build more inclusive communities, to build sustainable systems outside of the capitalist model that's failed them. There's a lot of that that goes on, and it's people, it's working class folks supporting each other, and it's building across that divide of race and class, and organizing across that, and helping folks also realize that we're all in this together, and we've got to take care of each other. So it's I could go on for an hour, my thoughts on that, but the problem is we have so many of these communities that have been abandoned, and it's been by design. And we have so many people who have been extracted from and are dispossessed and are quite hopeless in a lot of cases, even though there's a lot of brilliant folks within their communities that they can work with. So a lot of what we do is, personally, I build bridges between folks who traditionally haven't worked together. Here in Camp Hill, we've got the First Universalist Church, and we've got Mount Lovely Baptist Church. These are churches that have traditionally been completely segregated, and they're working together on the Marketplace project here. And we've got folks who've lived here for generations who are going inside of each other's buildings, and they've never been there. These folks who aren't talking. And so I personally approach it. I have a fairly simple method, and that is, connecting folks, and let's talk about what does community build mean to you, and what are we going to do together to help rebuild that idea of what community is.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely so cool. I really appreciate what Hometown Action is out there doing, and especially y'all's focus on rural communities that don't get the attention that, a Birmingham or Huntsville would get. And I think it really takes people operating in different spaces from different angles so that we can all pull together. I think we need folks in the workplace building unions, but we also need folks out in the community building people power in other ways, which I think Hometown Action is there in that arena. Whether it's mutual aid or other ways that we can build people power in our own neighborhoods and our own towns and cities. So really appreciate what y'all are doing there. Did y'all have any, would you say there's any priorities that Hometown Action has coming up, or is there anything y'all have slated for the next year that, you're excited about?
Oh, for sure. We've got a lot of canvassing efforts going on in communities across Alabama right now, because not only, we've got to do that, we've got to get the work informed by the folks in these communities. So that's we're at.
And so let me stop you there. When you're talking about canvassing in this context, we're talking more like a deep canvassing where Hometown Action is out talking to people in the community, more so listening to people in the community, not. This isn't the same as canvassing to go get you to vote for somebody on a certain day, right?
For sure. I mean, that's it. You hit the nail on the head with listening. No one listens anymore, right? And folks want to tell their stories. They want to be seen, and they want to be heard. And these areas, these rural areas that have been abandoned, that are vacuums now, that are being filled with extremism because we don't have folks challenging narratives. We don't have folks giving an alternative in some of these areas. I mean, perfect example is with the striking miners. When we came in, it was about supporting the workers there, supporting their families. And I've seen a lot of folks, hearts and minds change about what they've been told and what they've been taught, and how people have tried to divide them against their neighbors and against each other. And so just at a fundamental level, that's what it's about, is listening to people, figuring out what their needs are, what their dreams and desires are, what they want to protect in their community, right? And then what they want to build on. And I often get this question from a lot of folks. I got it at the Labor Notes Troublemaker School, the panel I was on, and it was how do I even begin? And it's go talk to your neighbors. There are people within your community who can help you figure this stuff out. You don't have to do it on your own. Right.
It starts one conversation at a time, I think. And I think that's the best way to approach it. If you wake up in the morning and think you're just going to, solve the world's problems that day, you're in for a lot of disappointment. But I think if you have the approach that one conversation at a time, you can start to build solidarity. You can start to form allies in the community and find shared interest. There's a lot that we can do to make our world a better place. And so I really appreciate what y'all are doing in Hometown Action here in the state of Alabama. So why should people get involved with Hometown Action, and how can they actually do that?
We are one of the very few organizations I feel is doing work that is very focused on rural areas. I feel like if we don't figure this out, if we don't connect enough of our people, if we don't rebuild what these communities are, the reckoning that is coming as a result of the wholesale abandonment of our people in a lot of these spaces is not going to be pleasant, and it's not going to stay in the rural areas. Like, we don't live in a vacuum. The issues that Atlanta faces and the issues that Camp Hill faces, a lot of them are very similar in a lot of ways. And a lot of the conversations that I've had, I feel like, as I said in the beginning, it's a moral imperative that we do this work and that we figure out how to work together, because the future that I personally, and a lot of others who agree with me, see coming isn't a pleasant one if we don't learn to live together, and we don't stop. If we have to start breaking down these divides, right? These invisible walls that have been built between all of us. And for me, the cornerstone of that, and what I've come to realize, is the focus on sharing, working class, our self-interest. It's been done before. We're not reinventing the wheel. People in the past have been saying this for a long time. The problem is we don't see it going on in a wholesale effort in rural spaces.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, and we do have a rich history to draw from of ordinary people organizing amongst each other and coming together across lines of race and gender and religion and all these other barriers that are out there to divide us from one another. And that's the one thing that the leadership of Alabama has always feared more than anything else, is when ordinary people, particularly ordinary white and black people, are able to come together and fight for their common interests. So anything in my mind that advances that builds people power, that brings us closer together, is something worthy of our attention and our support, and I would put Hometown Action in that category. So, David, did you have anything for Warren before we let him get out of here?
No, I'm just happy to know Warren, Kathleen, and all the folks, Justin, over at Hometown Action. Appreciate everything that they do, and I just, if you're gonna let him go, I just say go out and seek them out on the internet. You can get involved with them on their Zoom calls. They have regular Zoom calls that they invite the community members in to participate in, and it kind of goes back to that same old saying, there's more that unites us than divides us. And the politicians do their best to keep us from talking to each other and just having normal conversations and realizing that we actually have a lot of things in common, and we could actually do a lot of good in our communities like Hometown Action is doing, outside of relying on a government to take care of us or a government to, kind of lead the way. We can lead the way ourselves if they'll get out of the way. And that sounds kind of like a Reagan-esque quote, but there's a lot of truth to that, and Hometown Action's doing it. One of the things that you didn't mention was, I wanted to mention, was Automotive Free Clinic that you come up for and help Zach with. It's good work.
Got to work together. I've been so impressed with what Zach has created there, and I've been thankful to work in community with Zach. I'm right now in Camp Hill, where I'm currently sitting. I'm in Chambers County. Many folks read the book Hammer and Hoe. They're familiar with the communist sharecroppers organizing and the racial violence that resulted. I'm a quarter mile away from where all of that went down. This is the same place, and we honor that work that was attempted and done in the past with the things that we do, and trying to change the mindsets of what's possible in rural areas where there is so much hopelessness. But my goodness, the folks like CJ Marbett and Dean Bonner here in town, the individuals I get to meet, people who sit on the internet and they say that there's nothing going on in rural places, or people vote against their own interest, or all of those things that they throw out. They just get out here and talk to folks and meet with folks. They realize that a hell of a lot of that is noise, and that we can actually find a way to work together.
Right. And we don't have much of a choice. To kind of bring it back to something you mentioned earlier about the future that we're facing, I think anyone who doesn't have their head in the sand can look around and see the state of the world, see the state of the environment, the state of the economy, and recognize that, you know, your kids and my kids are not going to have it as good as we had it. And frankly, we didn't have it as good as our parents had it. In a lot of ways, and this cycle is continuing to get worse, and so we don't have a choice but to get together and work with each other, because each other's all we've got. So thank you, Hometown Action. Thank you, Warren. Yeah, it was great to see you at Troublemaker School. I know you'll be out and about. I'm sure we'll run into you again, but you guys have always been willing to work with other folks and be in coalition with folks, and I think that's important as well. So yeah, I just want to echo David's comments. If you're looking for a way to get involved in the community, if you are in a rural area, or you want to, you know, maybe get more connected with rural areas, whether you're in a union already or, you know, you don't have a union, this could be your outlet to get involved. So check it out, Hometown Action. Warren, you got anything else to plug before we let you out of here?
Just hometownaction.org. I am Warren at hometownaction.org. Very simple email. Reach out to me. Get in touch. If you're like some of the folks I've mentioned in your community, and you feel like there's not a lot of options for you and you want to do something, please get in touch with us.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Warren. We appreciate it, and you have a good rest of your weekend.
All right. Appreciate it.
Warren.
Thank y'all.
All right, y'all. So, yeah, appreciate Warren. It was good to see him. Appreciate Hometown Action. They're always up to good stuff. Appreciate their support of the show. And y'all, I think we're gonna call it an early day today. With Jacob being out, I'm a little bit under the weather myself, and appreciate David being willing to spend some of his Saturday, some of his off day with me today in the studio. A couple of final reminders before we let y'all out of here. You can listen to the Valley Labor Report. If you missed anything today, you can go back and check out the podcast or the YouTube feed. Typically, the podcast is going to be a cleaned up version of the audio. So, you know, if there was some little glitches today, if you want to check it out in the next day or two on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, probably, you know, be a little bit better version for you. We'll have some of these clips as standalone videos on YouTube throughout the week. October 24th is the deadline to register to vote in time for the November election. And next week, I know Jacob's going to be back. I will not be in the studio next week, since I'll be at the Climate Summit in Houston. So we got some weird scheduling going on, but really appreciate everyone who's supporting the Valley Labor Report, everyone who's tuned in today. And again, don't forget to give us a voicemail, send us a text message. If you've got any feedback, let us know. 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. And you can buy our merch, give us a little donation on our website, tvlr.fm. David, you got any closing words for us today?
No, just share the show, man. Share the show, you know. Like I said earlier in the beginning of the show, there's a reason why the labor movement in Alabama is flourishing, and I truly believe it's because of the show and the work y'all do. And it's important that people continue to share the show and the word gets out and people are listening. I had a guy reach out from Missouri this past week talking about the railroads and the strike that's coming up. And, you know, and the only reason is because of the show. So
that's awesome.
You know, you may not have a dime to your name. You may be struggling like a lot of people are, but you can share the show and give a comment and say, hey, have a listen. and it'll go a long ways.
It really does, and we really appreciate it. I mean, we do this show to try to advance the labor movement and try to connect people and educate people. It's, you know, we're under no illusions that this is going to be a money maker for us or anything like that. We don't have corporate billionaires who are sponsoring our media careers. We're just a few guys trying to talk union here in the South and let people know that there is an alternative to the mainstream corporate media and an alternative to what the bosses and politicians are selling to you every day. And that alternative is banding together with people power and organizing to build a better future. So if you believe in that, you care about having our own media, check us out, tvlr.fm, chip in a couple bucks, but more importantly, share and talk to your neighbors, tell your friends and coworkers about the program. And if you have any feedback or any suggestions about what we should talk about or who we should talk about, just send them our way. And with that, we're going to sign out. Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor. This is the Valley Labor Report. Y'all have a great weekend.